happy to be here and so great this is the first event in this space, right? So very excited to be the first event here, and I'm so happy to be here with Mona. It's the only way I can see her right now because she's touring like crazy, as you may already know. But we're gonna start by reading a bit from our books. So I'm gonna start reading from a little bit from How Can I Help You? And so this is a book about two women. One is a reformed serial killing nurse, and she has come to work in a public library, and it's like her sanctuary. She loves it. And she's been there for 2 years, and then this new worker, a librarian, a reference librarian, comes to start working there, Patricia, and she is also not a dark past, but she has a secret, which is that she's a failed novelist. And so she has sworn off writing, and the moment that she meets Margot, she senses like, this is a character. This is something's going on with this woman, and the two are drawn together and kind of circle each other and do this interesting dance, and all kinds of bad things happen. So that's the intro, and the book is written in the two voices of the two women. This is Margot's voice. This is the nurse turned library worker, and it's pretty early on. And Patricia, the new woman, has just started working, so she's already starting to feel a bit uneasy. While I'm checking out a pile of comic books for two teens, I glance Patricia's way. Stylish and sleek, she's like a rare bird over there, flaunting her feathers in the gloom. She radiates coolness, too. I look around, trying to see the library through her eyes. The water stains on the ceiling, the faded gray love seat in YA, the drawn faces of our computer users washed deadly white or gray in the light of their screens. Will she stay in a place like this, or just land here for a while before flitting away? I turn my full attention back to the teens. These ones aren't so bad. They're nervous and shy, with acne-pitted skin and mouths full of metal. You kids have any schoolwork to do, or are these comic books your homework? I ask, and they titter. They're manga, the boy says, but not unkindly, not haughtily. I know what manga are. After 2 years, I've learned, but I play along anyway. While we're chatting, I sense Patricia's eyes on me, her interest warming my skin. What brought you here, Margot? She's wondering. But when I look up, she's picking through the desk drawers, examining a ruler, not the least bit interested in learning my story, of course. Who am I to her? My spirits sag a little as I say goodbye to the teens. Just behind them is Julia Mather, one of our top 5 local eccentrics. It's like she popped up out of nowhere with her long, flyaway gray hair, her gnarled hands, and glossy red nails. It's hard not to stare at those nails as she gestures wildly. She's clearly worked up. I've returned several books in that metal box outside, and you all continue to lose them. I wait for a beat. She'll go on. Julia always goes on. I returned one just the other day, and now it's listed as lost, and apparently I owe money. My taxes pay your salaries here, you know. We do know. Julia has told us many times, other patrons have too. If the book is lost, I start. But it isn't. I returned it to the metal box, Julia insists. My fingers tap quickly across the keyboard to bring up her record. Ah, I say. With one hand, with one set of red nails, she twitches a long strand of hair over her shoulder. I stare at the screen, pretending to be lost in thought. Usually, Julia amuses me. Today, though, she simply annoys me. I try to breathe and relax my face. I had patients like her, of course, domineering ones who were always right, no matter what the nurses and doctors said or did. The patients were easier to deal with, half naked and vulnerable in their hospital gowns, shivering with illness or fear, even as they struggled for power. You knew they wanted comfort, reassurance more than anything, and it was easy to provide. I never raised my voice once, like some others did. I only smiled and soothed them with words or a quick jab. A shame I can't do that with Julia. I stare at her coldly, scanning her body. When she was younger, she must have been beautifully slim. Now she's the kind of thin that makes your skin hurt to look at her. Her nails are hidden under glossy color, but I bet they're ridged and bumpy, signs of ill health. And her dry, rasping cough doesn't bode well either. But who knows? People like her can live off bitterness for years, unless someone helps them, nudges them over the rim. What is it? What does it say? Julia leans forward, breaking the spell as she cranes her neck toward my screen. I refuse to turn it toward her, though I'm supposed to. I see one book here that is long overdue, The Rise of Towson Manor by J.S. Cullen. She nods vigorously. That's the one. Go out there and check. Go out there right now and you'll see. It's there. In my mind, I'm lifting her up in the air, rattling her bones, dropping her back down. That isn't my job, Mrs. Mather. Other staff members do that regularly. If it were in the box, they would have found it by now, and we'd see it here in the system. I tap my screen. Julia rears up, lifting her hands with her voice. This is the 44th book of mine you've lost. I won't pay this library a cent. I pay your salary, you know, and everyone's salary here. She rakes her nails through the air to include us all, the layabouts who profit from Julia's bounteous wealth. Patricia is watching. Everyone is watching. I have the urge to bark out an angry laugh, but I beat it back. I'm afraid this is the 44th book of ours that you've lost, Mrs. Mather, I say quietly, leaning close and staring into her rheumy blue eyes. Just as her quivering lips open to protest, I lean even closer. Now go home and find that book. Go home and find the other books too. If you don't, you'll be paying a hefty fine, one that's long overdue. I'll collect it myself. Julia takes 2 stumbling steps back. I think she'll make a fuss, but then her hands wilt at her sides. She steps farther back from the desk, staring at me. Then she turns suddenly and shuttles through the door, her curtain of gray hair flying behind her.
That was awesome. Thank you all so much for coming. It's such an honor to be here, and such an honor to share this night with Laura. I love How Can I Help You? So it's really fun. I'm going to read a little bit from Rouge. So just to give a bit of context, Rouge is a Gothic fairy tale about beauty, envy, and grief. And it's about a lonely dress shop clerk named Belle, who, following the sudden and mysterious death of her mother, gets sucked into this very lavish, sinister cult. Beauty cult, I should say. And I'm just going to read, without too much context, I'll just say that this is a scene where she's in the labyrinth. Yeah. Metaphorically speaking, or maybe literally. Okay. I'm in some sort of dark red waiting room, heavy with the scent of eucalyptus, mirrors all around. Bon voyage, the woman in silver said, and then she was gone. She took my clothes and my shoes and my purse with her, left me standing here barefoot in a white and red robe. I hear a waterfall somewhere, the distant sound of chimes. Some red magazines, looks like, on a black marble table. Beside them, a vase full of what looks like raspberries. Also, chilled water jugs filled with, what is it, blood vessels? Pomegranate seeds. Get a grip, I tell myself. A little nervous, I guess. Why a little nervous? When they've been nothing but kind. Just a spa. Just a free treatment. How many times have I sat at the dress shop looking up pictures of the fanciest spas on my phone, wishing I could walk through those gilded gates and walk out again, lifted and glowing and reborn, thinking the secret is just behind those gates. Secret to what? Something essential. And now I'm here, within the gates. In the waiting room. Better, much better than my Montreal spa's waiting room with its dated copies of Elle and its cheap paper cups of weak tea. I go there twice a year, which is the most I can afford. Twice a year, a woman in a white smock takes me into a darkened cubicle and electrocutes my face. I taste metal in my teeth for weeks after, but it's worth it for that slightly lifted look. After the electrocution, she calls it microcurrent. She coats my still spasming skin with marine algae. I lie there under the cold black sea goop for as long as she'll let me, dreaming of luminosity, how I'll soon glow in the dark. What the fuck did you do to your face, Mother would say when we FaceTimed afterward. Nothing, I'd say. Liar, she'd say, you did something. Tell me. Don't I have a lifted look? You have a scared look, like you've been stunned. Well, maybe next time I visit you, I can go where you go. She got silent then, waved her hand as if to wave my words away. You don't want to go where I go. I've told you, you don't need any of this stuff. That Egyptian blood saves you. I'm another story. Well, now I'm here, Mother. I've gone where you go. Maybe I'm not another story after all. I take a seat in one of the chairs shaped like a wave. I picture Mother sitting in this very chair. Imagine her in a white and red robe, listening to the chimes in the waterfall, partaking of pomegranate water, soaking it all up with a non-wrinkle-inducing smile. This'll be good. It makes me smile too. There's another woman with me in the room. She's beautiful. Her dark skin glows in the dim light. Her eyes are pale. Maybe she's mixed too. Ethnically ambiguous, as Mother might say. Where are you from? I would ask this woman if I didn't fucking hate that question myself. The way Mother would answer for me, smile and say Egypt, right as I said Montreal. The woman's flipping a magazine, too dark for me to see the cover. Can she really be reading in the dark? She looks up at me and smiles. First time, she says. It isn't a question. She knows it's my first time. Yes, I say, and my voice echoes in the room like it's a corridor. They offered me a free treatment. A free treatment, the woman repeats, raising an eyebrow. Me too. You too? Lucky us. These cost a pretty penny, so I'm told. Is it your first time too? I ask her. Not a furrow on her brow, not a wrinkle. She's flawless. I've had one, she says. Still need a few more for the brightening. The brightening, I ask. The glow, she whispers. She goes back to reading her red magazine in the dark. I'm glad she's here, another client. Otherwise I'd feel, not afraid exactly, that's ridiculous, just sort of weird, getting a treatment at, what time is it now? No clock on the wall, and the woman in silver took my purse and my phone. Late, anyway, for a facial. Is it a facial that I'm getting, though? Never really clarified that. Just took what the woman in red dangled. Said, thanks so much. How is it? I ask her. She looks up at me like she forgot I was there. How is it? The treatment. Oh, well, it's different for everyone, isn't it? Right, I say like I understand. I notice black tapered candles on the table now, red rose petals scattered all around. There's a mirror wall beside us, 1,000 of me, going on to infinity. Deeply perilous, she says, turning to the mirror wall, smiling at herself there. Perilous? Did I say perilous? I meant personal, of course. Of course. Personal. Personal. Come on, lady. A facial is a facial is a facial. Even I know that. There are white faces on the wall above the mirror, I see. Plaster casts sticking out of black frames, making expressions of open-mouthed horror. So is it a microcurrent then, I ask her? She just stares at her many reflections. Or a laser? Ultrasound? Radio frequency? She smiles like all the words I just said are funny. Funny little things. Appeal, maybe, I press. Glycolic? She laughs, tilting her neck back. Not a ring on that neck, not a blemish. You certainly know some terminology, don't you? She takes a sip of the red champagne. Hers looks thick and dark, the color and viscosity of blood. Does it have any bubbles? Not any that I can see. But then again, the room is dark, isn't it? Silly to be afraid. Sure, the white faces in the wall are a little weird, but could just be a rich people thing. Like the jellyfish behind the red curtain, part of the eccentric spa decor. The woman is still chuckling to herself, still looking in the mirror, her thick red champagne in her hand. Glycolic, she repeats, shaking her head. Oh my. Daughter of Noel, someone calls softly. A small woman in a black suit standing in a doorway. A woman like a whisper. We're ready for you. The woman with the magazine stops chuckling. She looks at me, suddenly so very serious. Letting go is so worth it, she says. Excuse me? But she's turned away again, staring at herself in the dark. And that's it. Thank you.
Well, that was wonderfully creepy. as I expect from Miss Mona Awad. So, Mona, can you tell us how the story began?
Yeah, sure. And then I want to hear how yours began. How it started for me usually starts with some kind of moment of obsession or really profound powerlessness that I experience. And in this case, it was an addiction to YouTube skincare videos. It was very, very real and went on for months. I think we were actually, we were friends when this was unfolding. I couldn't stop watching them, and I was buying all the products that I could not afford, quickly hitting Rouge status at Sephora, which is a little bit of a wink, just a little. And then I don't know, I got a little scared, even though I was really into it, completely like in the matrix. My novelist brain started lighting up and thinking, oh yeah, there has to be something. Yes, exactly. Use your disease.
That's right.
So that's what I decided to do, because I knew that there was a lot more going on. I mean, apart from the beautiful products that are lovely and are quite like potions, with all their promise, there's like a shadow underneath it all. It felt like to me, and then the deeper I dug into it, the more I realized it was all just a breath away from horror, as I always suspected.
That's right. And you are the perfect person to explore it.
Yes.
That's right, the shadow world.
Yes.
That's right.
And in your case?
In my case, I have always wanted to write a female serial killer novel. It's been one of my dreams. And because I find, women who kill are very rare.
Yeah.
Not, even serial killers, just any woman who kills. And so I find it to be sort of a transgressive act, and even a feminist one in some ways, very problematic ways. But anyway, so I've always wanted to write about a female serial killer. And I was listening to an episode of Criminal, the podcast Criminal, and this was quite a few years ago before I started this book, and they did an episode on Jane Toppin, who was known as Jolly Jane, and she was a nurse in the 1800s, and she was a wonderful nurse, very cheerful and efficient, and people loved her, and she was also murdering her patients. She was injecting them with morphine, and she was also climbing on top of them to watch them die in a state of ecstasy. So I found her really fascinating. Especially when you think about a woman who kills inside of the caretaking role, right?
Yes.
Which is what we women have been assigned to for millennia. It is a really transgressive act too, and I'm not saying that I admire it. I'm just saying it's super fascinating. So I was fascinated by her, had that in the back of my mind. I had started working at a library about 4 years ago, and I was noticing that it was very different from the library that my graduate school program had prepared me for, and that it was very different from the library that we see in film or in books. It is like, you know, a really lively community center. We welcome everyone who has nowhere to go, basically. They come to the library, and every day something really interesting happens when I'm at work, and I started writing those down, and at some point those things merged, because I didn't want to write like a straight serial killer novel where you're following somebody as they murder people, right? I wanted to do it slant. So at some point I was like, oh, she belongs in the library.
Of course
So,
she does.
yeah. Need for the library.
Yeah.
So, yes. I, you know, love your, oh wait, I want to talk about first, sorry. I want to talk about, okay, this is a dark gothic fairy tale, Rouge. And I wonder what for you is the allure and the power of fairy tales?
Yeah.
And were there any that inspired it along the way as you were writing?
Yeah, it's interesting that you were talking about how you had the two ideas and they sort of come together, right?
Yeah.
There's like this moment where you realize it's the same book.
Yeah.
So I think I had always had kicking around in my head, Snow White was a story that I always wanted to explore as a novel, because I was always fascinated by that mirror figure, so mysterious, so enigmatic, and that relationship that the queen has with the mirror is so interesting and intimate and strange, and dark, you know. And so, you know, it was a story that I had in my heart, my head for a long time. And when I was watching these beauty videos, there is a fairy tale-like quality to the promise of, you know,
and
pursuing
exactly
the potion-like quality, the way that beauty and the beauty industry engages myth and fairy tale, even in its packaging, in its language, in its presentation. The possibility of transformation is always kind of hovering there. And so fairy tales were actually coming to mind as I was deep in the, like, you know, in the rabbit hole of my addiction that was very real and still maybe ongoing. And yeah, and then they just kind of became the same book, because the feelings that you know, I think are aroused by watching these videos are maybe some of the feelings that are experienced in Snow White, and that fairy tale is exploring. Knowledge of mortality, not wanting to lose yourself, wanting to hang on to yourself. It's actually a very poignant thing that I think the beauty industry knows and like kind of uses a little bit. Yeah, and I'm there for it, but you know, it's dark. And so there's that. There was just inherent there, and envy. You know, I mean, of course, the videos elicit envy, right? Deep envy and vulnerability and insecurity and all these things. So mortality, envy, beauty, Snow White.
Yeah.
For sure.
Absolutely.
So that's how they kind of came together for me. And I love working with fairy tales because I love the way that they use symbols and fantasy and stories of transformation to explore, you know, very real anxieties, you know, very, very real struggles that we all deal with, rites of passage that we all go through. And in Snow White, that is just the knowledge that your time will come to an end. You will be, you know, you will, exactly. And there's, I have, you know, there's like some real issues with that, or there's stuff in that fairy tale that's so mysterious. Like, you don't really know if the queen is talking to herself or if the mirror is this outside entity that's planting something in her, this dark seed.
Right.
So I've really wanted to make the mirror a very like enigmatic and mysterious and more instrumental figure in pitting the mother against the daughter.
Oh, yes.
in this one.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
you teach fairy tale also, right? So
Yes.
has that helped you like go deeper and, I don't know,
Yeah.
find more material also?
Yeah. I love studying fairy tale because I do think that they really do kind of narrate, they're wish fulfillments, you know, and they usually start in a place of real powerlessness. Usually the main character in a fairy tale is somebody who is suffering, somebody who lacks something, somebody who's just lost a parent or a child. And then this dream-like thing happens where maybe they're given the thing that they long for. Maybe in a tricky way, maybe in an overt way, but it's actually very, when you think about how they're fulfilling a wish, they're offering like this dream of another kind of life where you can have what you long for, what you've lost. They
But
really
there's
feel
a
like
price.
there's a price, and they feel like very poignant stories, you know, to draw from.
Yeah.
So I want to know more about your two women. Tell us more about Margot, and tell us more about Patricia.
So Margot and Patricia are the two main characters, and one is the reformed serial killer, and the other's the reformed novelist. And originally the book was just Margot's voice. That's what I had done in Looker. You know, I was a poet before Looker, so I didn't really know what I was doing when I was writing a novel, and how do you do that?
Right.
But this time I kind of wanted to, as I was writing Margot and I was really into her voice and being in her head, I realized that she needed like a foil. She needed more. And so I came up with Patricia, and there is a lot of me in Patricia because she's a writer, and all writers have had many, many mountains of frustrations and rejections and everything, so I could like channel
violent
that.
impulses.
Violent impulses that we don't act on,
Right.
as far as you know.
Right.
So, yeah, so I have this writer and this murderer, and I have always thought that there was a huge overlap between especially serial killers and novelists. So I think, stay with me. So because both have these projects, right, that they're totally devoted to and
meticulous.
And meticulous, yes, meticulous.
Never finished.
Yes, they will compulsively, try to complete and never can. They're kind of outsiders in society, right, who stand back and observe, at least for a while. So they're like marginal creatures in a way. It's lonely for both the serial killer and the novelist. So lonely. And there's lots of other stuff. So as I was writing them, I started to see them less as two distinct women and more as kind of two sides of the same coin. And so then they became even more interesting to me.
Yeah.
Patricia became really interesting to me, thinking of her that way.
I remember when that happened, and you got really excited
I'm
about
glad
her.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I remember.
This is why you have friends, because they can hold the memory for you that you no longer have.
Yes. And remind you and tell you the story.
That's right.
And it's yours again to tell.
I know. So yes, Mona is such a dear and important friend to me. And I know there was a piece recently in Esquire, I think, about literary friendships. And so we kind of wanted to talk about that too, and about, as I was saying, it's such a lonely, it can be a lonely life, you know? And, we talk very frequently, and we talk about industry stuff, we talk about plot points, all kinds of stuff.
Other grievances.
Lots and lots of grievances. The things that you can't say aloud to your people, your team.
Right.
So.
Yes, it's true. I mean, I feel like there are some things that just nobody is going to understand except for another writer.
Right.
You know, so many moments that
true.
When you share them with a writer, you just know they fully get it. Like, and things that you perceive as failures, things that you perceive as successes.
Yes.
writer understands
Yes.
why you might perceive them one way
Yes.
or the other.
And they
Yeah.
can also tell you, no, your perception is
It's
wrong.
Yes.
You're actually doing great.
Yes.
Right? But
Exactly.
you can't see that yourself. They hold up a mirror
Yes.
back to the mirror.
That's
But
right.
it's a loving mirror.
That's right. It's not a creepy
Not a
mirror.
terrifying
Right,
mirror.
yeah.
Yeah. Not one of your mirrors.
No.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm very grateful
Me too.
for that. I adore your prose style. You know, it is so distinctive. Open any Mona Awad book and you know that it's hers. It's lyrical and rich and has its own like musicality to it. And I always notice it, but I really noticed it in Rouge. And I wonder if it feels like it matches the subject matter, since I feel like almost all of your books are fairy tales in some way, but this
Right.
one really went into the fairy tale, and I felt like your prose went there too. Did you feel that when you were writing it?
Yeah, I think I did. You know, I think for me it was a really interesting process with this one, because normally when I write a book, and I don't know if this is true for you, Laura, probably you have like, you know, some very strong relationship to how you get voice. But for me, I will hear a book before I see it. Like I'll hear the character, I'll text the voice to myself. That's what happened with Bunny. I would text Sam's voice like to myself, and I could really I just knew it, you know? And then with All's Well, it was the same. I could really picture this, you know, the main character in All's Well is a theater director who's suffering from chronic pain, and I could just imagine her speaking in her mind to this invisible audience that is always understanding, because she could no longer be believed by anyone else. So she's just going to talk in her mind, right? So I could hear her.
Yeah.
With this one, I saw her before I heard her. It was a very different experience. I guess she was just hidden behind too many layers of serum and sunglasses
Too much
and
glow.
sunscreen, too much glow. And so it actually took a minute because of all of the armor I think that she had. So once I did get it right, like once I leaned into her obsession and had fun with that, and just how obsessed she was with the surface and stayed there,
Yeah.
then all the stuff underneath started rising up, and the language got a lot more elemental, and it really it started to have its own engine. But it did take a minute. It was interesting,
Yeah.
and I think it is because it's a book that's very interested in the surface, in the visual.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I almost always hear like
Right.
the voice
Yes.
in my head.
Was that true for Looker, for your first book?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Like, that one was like weird.
Yeah.
Landed in my head.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember.
And then I dreamed that night that I was holding the finished book in my hand, and it had Looker on it. That's how I got the title for that book. So that was
Wow.
crazy.
That
Wasn't
is
quite like
crazy.
that for this one, but Margot's voice was super strong and easy for me to just slip into.
How did the title come to you?
Oh, well, it didn't come to me yet.
Okay.
It came to my agent.
Oh.
No, it was called Poor Strangers first, this book,
Okay.
which is a phrase that's kind of important in the book. And my, you know, so we were texting about the book and stuff, and he's like, I love Poor Strangers, you know, they manage you, right? They're
Yes.
gentle.
Yes.
I love Poor Strangers as a title, but I don't know that it's something that people are going to want to grab up, you know? It's not super, it might sound a little depressing from the Poor Strangers. So he was talking about, okay, well, helping is a huge theme. What about, you know, how can I help you? And really, he came up with it and chopped the question mark off,
Right.
or added creepiness, and
Yeah,
to
I
give
love
you
that.
a little like subtext into the title. But and then I loved it. I really did love it. I didn't miss Poor Strangers. So
I think that's good. It's the perfect title.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think it is. I think it is.
Your book has a really interesting relationship to Shirley Jackson's We Have Always Lived in a Castle. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was just happened to be rereading. I was having a hard time finding a book that I loved, and I picked up How Can I Help You?
You've got it in your hand.
Amazing book.
That's why. Yeah.
We Have Always Lived in the Castle, and reread it, and you know, I just was blown away. I adore her.
She's so good.
Like it's deceptively simple. You know, her prose is so clean, the story is so gripping and weird, but also universal.
Yes.
So I adored it, and I was like, oh, I think I'll stick it in the book.
Yeah.
And so it has a role in the book, pretty important one, and because I realized there were like some productive kind of overlaps with this story and that one.
Yeah.
What about Rouge? Were there books or movies or anything that you had in mind when you were writing, or aside from the beauty?
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, for sure. I thought a lot about Suspiria, and I thought a lot about a movie that I love that not a lot of people know. It's called In Fabric, and it's directed by a British director named Peter Strickland. And it's kind of like, it is a bit of horror, it's funny, but it's about a demonic red dress that kills people whenever they wear it. And it mostly takes place in a department store in London on the high street. And what I love about it is it's a very realistic setting, every day, very everyday, but the people who work there look like vampires. They have like these black capes and they speak in these really formal, like circuitous ways that you can barely understand. And even though that's like, it's so obvious the way that it's shot that is a signal of great danger, that everybody should pay attention, but everybody's just shopping and enjoying themselves, or just, it's normalized.
Right.
These, and I love that.
Yeah.
It delights me to no end.
Yeah.
And I definitely was inspired by that, tonally, for Rouge.
Oh,
yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah, like I'm being seduced, I'm being enchanted by something terrifying, and maybe there's like a part of my brain that knows that,
Right.
but logic won't save me.
Right.
Because I'm already enchanted.
Right.
Right.
Oh.
That state is fun. So yeah.
And speaking also of like location, La Jolla, the book is set in La Jolla for the most, for almost,
La Jolla and Montreal.
In Montreal,
Right.
yeah. So most people don't associate Southern California with, you know, this kind of like dark Gothic vibe. So what is it about La Jolla? I know you like to go there to write.
Well, yes, I do love it. It's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
But I mean, it might just be my brain. I mean, I see beauty videos, I see death anxiety. That's what I see in the beauty video.
Right.
I see beauty videos, I see horror, like a horror novel. I see La Jolla, I see, you know, creepy spa, you know, by the water's edge, the abyss. That's what I see when I look at the ocean, the sunsets bleeding into the. But no, it's beautiful, and I love that on the surface it's one thing, but there are these infinite depths. Which is exactly right for this character. Yeah. You know, she was so difficult to kind of grasp her depths because the surface was so alluring and so deceptive.
Right.
And so La Jolla, I felt like was the perfect place to set a Gothic fairy tale in the end.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the contrast is lovely.
Oh, questions? Yeah. Yeah, of course. Sure. Let's open it up. Questions?
I don't know how you met.
Oh yeah, you tell me.
We met through her partner, who I met in 2004 in St. Petersburg, Russia, at this writing conference type of thing, and we became friends. And then I'm trying to do math. This is 14 years later or so. He came to the city, we remained friends, and he came to the city, my girlfriend Mona, and so she was doing a reading for her first novel, and we met, and we clicked, and I asked her to read Looker for a blurb, and she did, and we just like corresponded and became really close.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ken, her poor boyfriend is like lost by the wayside. Still love Ken, but I talk to Mona a lot.
questions? Yeah.
I'm a big fan of like Angela Carter,
Yeah.
and I know that was like written about with like Bunny.
Yes.
But did you have like anything related to her for this book, or like I feel like I can see it.
Oh, totally, yeah. I love her fairy tales. And she has a great collection called The Bloody Chamber. It's a very, very kind of gothic approach to revisioning some really eerie fairy tales, including Bluebeard. So yeah, I was definitely thinking about her, especially tonally, because she can be very creepy, very sexy, very funny, very disturbing, all in like one moment. So I definitely had her in my head. She's so good. And the Magic Toy Shop too. I always go back to that one. So she's really important to me. Thank you for the question. Yeah.
Did any real life experiences you had influence Bunny?
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, I'm terrified of groups, I'll be honest. I really hate them. Like my friendship with Laura is like one-on-one, that's one thing, right? And I love that, and that I feel like I can be fully myself and share, but in a group, I don't know how to do that. I'm really afraid of it. So I just kind of tapped into, I think that anxiety. And I think too, in MFAs, it's so easy to feel that kind of anxiety. I know it as a student, and I know it as a teacher now. That feeling like you're gonna lose your voice, you're not gonna find your voice. Somebody's gonna steal your voice. Like so many things to feel scared about. And you're so vulnerable in that setting because you're sharing your work, maybe for the first time with strangers, right? And it's so hard not to spin a story about like what is happening. You're a writer, that's what you do, you spin stories, right? So yeah, I mean, that book was totally born out of a lot of my very real anxieties to do with creativity and also just to do with all social situations. Yeah. Yeah.
What are your current obsessions, and are they fueling any new stories?
I'm working on a prequel to Bunny right now. Yeah. I really missed it. So I wanted to go back into that world. Do you find that, like when you are finished with a book, do you find that, because we've talked about this, the grieving thing,
You missed it.
Yeah, you miss it.
But I think that sometimes you miss the, I mean, I do think you genuinely miss it, but sometimes I think you miss like the finished, perfect, not that it's perfect, but the finished form of it.
Yeah.
And then you have to start
That's
over
true.
with the lump of clay.
Yes.
And that's so hard.
It is hard.
Even if you're excited about something.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
yes.
Hi.
Yeah.
This is sort of related to that. Have you ever kind of had the lump of clay, fleshed it out to a point, and then said, I'm going to use this one instead, written that book, and then later said, ooh, this lump of clay looks a lot better than I thought. Like, have you ever finished a book that you started before the other book, if that makes sense? Like, put one aside and then come back to it.
Yeah. No. I haven't done that. I'm trying to think. What I have done, I will tell you, is after I finished 13 Ways, I started working on a book. I don't know if I've ever told you this, Laura, but my second book was going to be this other a little surreal, like maybe a little elements of maybe like Muriel Spark, but it was just going to be about these three women living in a apartment complex, getting these letters. That was the whole thing, and I was working on that, and I was
Like
kind of
anonymous letters?
Yeah. It was not.
That sounds like one of my books.
I know. I feel like that, yeah. But I was working on that for a while after 13 Ways, and I had this other idea that was cooking in the back of my head, the bunny idea.
Yeah.
But it felt too crazy. And then I saw a bunny hopping by. It was springtime. And I was like, okay, I'm going to just fuck the other book. It's done. I'm just going to work on Bunny and see. And if I fail, I fail.
Yeah.
But I never went back. So those three ladies are still sitting there in the apartment. Yeah, I know. Maybe that's it was meant to be. Yeah, exactly.
Oh gosh. I have a problem with getting ideas in the middle of.
Yeah.
I'm doing that right now. Yeah, I'm working on a new book, and I'm like well into a revision of the first draft, and I've gotten this idea that I love. It keeps, and I do write it a little bit, you know, just to like release the pressure valve or whatever.
Yes.
But it's hard not to. It's hard to know. Also, well, should I stop this book that I've been working on and that is hard, and because writing is hard.
So what
And
makes
put
you
it aside?
decide?
Well, now I know. I guess I have done that in the past where I have swerved, but I didn't pick the book back up again, but I did swerve and do something new. I can't say I regret it, but I don't know. It's
Yeah.
so hard. Now I think I'm mature enough as a writer maybe to just be like, okay, well, this is hard, you're gonna finish it and get it in as good a shape as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And then, okay, I'll make a decision.
Right.
Or if a friend reads it and says, oh, this is not working, you know. It's hard.
Yeah.
Yes, and.
Oh,
I'm
oops.
sorry.
So you both write in this really cool genre of complicated women who have maybe broken bad or are a little bit unhinged and unwell. Do you have any inspiration of novelists who you kind of felt inspired by to write those types of books?
Yeah.
Definitely, for me, definitely Patricia Highsmith is, you know, Shirley Jackson again. I always forget, but Looker was inspired a lot by Elena Ferrante's Days of Abandonment.
Oh, yeah.
That was the first experience for me of reading a woman just raging, and it was so raw and gorgeous. And I was like, I want to channel that. You know, I want to channel my rage somewhere. So I did. But yeah,
For sure. Yeah, Jean Reese, I love. She's great. And she actually, reading her really helped me with 13 Ways.
yeah.
I just love, she's very vulnerable. Like the voices are always very vulnerable and really intimate. And she's very funny, but also dark. Just felt really honest. And so yeah, I really connected with her. I love her work, for sure. Yeah. Yes.
How did you meet Margaret Atwood?
Oh, how did I meet her? Well, she was a fan of Bunny on Twitter, and then the pandemic happened. This was just shortly after Bunny came out, so it was July 2019. And then the pandemic happened, and the paperback of Bunny was happening, and she agreed to be my conversation partner virtually. We did an event with the Strand, and that was amazing. That was the first time I really met her, like virtually. But then when we did this thing in November for T Magazine, I finally met her in person, and she was very, very. She's a character. She's really. She read my poems. She read everybody's poems, and she told me, this is so creepy. She's got some magic, Margaret. She told me to. She hadn't read Rouge yet. And she told me to turn a mirror toward the wall.
Wow.
Which is crazy, as you know, because there's a character in Rouge who does that. So, yeah, she's interesting. And she also gave me advice that I think is very useful for everyone. She just said to try to say "fuck it" more.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I do think is good advice for us all. Yeah.
One or two more?
Yeah, sure.
When you start writing a book, do you know how it's going to end, or do you find the ending as you're going?
I usually find it as I'm writing, and I usually get an image of, and again, this is just my second novel, but I usually get an image. In both cases, I've gotten an image of like the very, very ending, just the endings, like the page, the last page, the scene, and then I have to figure, and I'm really attached to it, and I have to figure out how in the hell am I going to get to that, and yeah, that's what usually happens.
Yeah, the exact same thing happens
Really?
to me, yes, yes. I usually get an image of the last scene, or the climactic scene, what turns out to be the climactic scene.
Yeah.
It's weird. It just kind of comes at some point in the writing process.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if you do this, but I don't force myself to write towards it necessarily, but I do keep it there in the back
Yeah.
of my head. It's very useful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't write it down or anything.
Right, no, I just picture it.
Yes.
I let it shift a bit if
Yeah.
it wants to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I find the hardest part of writing a book is that final, like, quarter of the book before the very ending. It's not the
Mhm.
ending, but it's the stuff that has to happen right before.
Yeah, that last little stretch. Yes.
Did you settle on jellyfish imagery throughout the book?
Jellyfish imagery, yeah. Well, it just, like Tom Cruise, it just showed up. So, it just showed up, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. There are jellyfish here at the spa. I'll leave them for now and see where it leads. And then it just became very important to the story, and I didn't know this at the time. There is a jellyfish that is immortal. So kind of perfect for a book about the pursuit of eternal youth and beauty. And also jellyfish are just, they're creepy, but they're beautiful. And yeah, they're the stuff of horror and the stuff of wonder, and they're in the depths, which is exactly what this book is about. So it turned out to be perfect, but it's one of those things where instinctually you make, something happens on the page,
Right.
and you're like, oh, okay, I'll just follow this and see. And then it turns out that it's like critical to the story, and you're like, oh my god, I just fucking stumbled on that. Thank God. But yeah, it's weird. Writing is weird. It's weird.
I only wish that there were more things with jellyfish patterns, because it's so easy to buy Mona gifts, like
Yeah.
bunny themed gifts.
Yes.
I looked for jellyfish themed stuff, and it's very hard.
Roses.
Yeah, roses. I know.
Yeah.
Aquarium gift shop.
That's right.
Yeah. But then they're like little kitty, you know?
Right.
I mean,
There's a market.
it's true. Yeah, that's right.
I think we're
Yeah. Thank
you guys
so
were
much.
wonderful. They are amazing, right?